I want to start by, well, asking you to just think about your life over the last 48 hours.
Yeah, just do a quick mental scan.
Right. Because we are pointing the lens directly at you, the listener, right from the jump today.
We really are.
Are you, the person who routinely answers work emails at 11 p.m. from bed, are you hitting literally every single one of your deadlines?
Ensuring the kids are perfectly fed with, like, a perfectly balanced meal.
Exactly. Making sure every single text message from your friends is promptly answered with an exclamation point. And when people ask how you are doing, do you say, I'm fine, and strangely enough, actually believe it?
That's the kicker, yeah.
If you are nodding along right now, you probably think you're just crushing it. You think you're highly productive, maybe just a little stressed, but generally winning at life.
Right, because that's what we're taught winning looks like.
Exactly. But today's deep dive is exploring a short, but honestly profoundly unsettling piece of writing called The Hidden Weight of High-Functioning Burnout.
It is definitely unsettling.
Yeah. Okay, let's unpack this. We are taking that piece, along with the structural blueprint of a real-world telehealth therapy practice in Georgia called Coping and Healing Counseling, to figure out what happens when success is actually a symptom. Our mission today is to basically examine the dark side of extreme competence.
And it is a really critical mission because the core thesis of this material fundamentally challenges how our society defines exhaustion. I mean, we are culturally conditioned to view burnout through a very specific, dramatic lens.
Right, like a total crash.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When we hear the word burnout, we picture a total systemic collapse. We imagine someone who physically cannot get out of bed, someone who is dropping every single ball at work.
Visibly falling apart at the seams.
Yes, missing deadlines, crying at their desk. Our culture equates burnout with a failure to function. But what this source material meticulously lays out is that burnout doesn't always look like a failure.
It doesn't look like a failure at all sometimes.
No, for a huge segment of the population, it disguises itself as extreme competence. It looks like overfunctioning.
Overfunctioning. Wow, that is a completely different paradigm. Instead of the engine sputtering and dying, the engine is just, running at 10,000 RPMs constantly?
Literally constantly.
And the text makes it really clear that this specific high-functioning type of burnout goes entirely unnoticed by society. Like, the people around you don't see it, your boss obviously doesn't see it, and dangerously, you don't even see it yourself.
Yeah, the mechanism of that disguise is what we really need to look at here. What's fascinating here is why it hides in plain sight.
Why does it?
Because the external metrics of success, the very things society uses to measure whether a person is doing well, they're all being met to the absolute letter.
The work gets done early, the house is spotless.
Right. The social obligations are perfectly fulfilled. Society looks at this person and sees a highly optimized machine. So what does society do?
It rewards them.
Exactly. It rewards them. They get praised for their reliability. They get promoted at work. They get asked to, organize the school bake sale because, they always have it together.
Right. Give it to Sarah. She can handle anything.
Yes. There are absolutely no external alarm bells ringing, which basically creates a positive feedback loop for a deeply negative internal state.
The outward appearance is flawless, which is just the perfect camouflage. I was actually trying to visualize what this looks like internally, and I kept thinking about a smartphone.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. Imagine your smartphone is running a dozen heavily intensive background apps all at once. You've got GPS, video rendering, huge downloads happening.
This is doing a lot.
Exactly. And if you look at the front of the phone, the screen is still at maximum brightness. The user interface is snappy. It responds perfectly when you tap it. But internally, the processor is literally melting down and the battery is quietly draining to zero in a matter of minutes.
Yes. Nobody looking at the screen would know the device is about to completely die.
Exactly. But I do have a problem with something the text claims, and I feel like I need to push back on it a little bit.
Yeah, let's hear it.
The source says this person says, I'm fine, and they actually mean it? How does that make sense? I mean, if my phone battery is at 1%, the system knows it's at 1%. If a person is running on absolute fumes, are they just, pathologically lying to themselves? Or is something else happening?
That's a great question. And no, they are not lying to themselves. What the source is pointing to is a fundamental physiological and psychological adaptation.
Okay.
When you operate in an over-functioning, high-stress state for months or, years, your brain literally recalibrates its baseline. It shifts the goalpost of what normal actually feels like.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Fine no longer means feeling rested or joyful or experiencing a sense of equilibrium. Through chronic exposure to stress, fine gets downgraded to simply mean I survived the day without catastrophically dropping a vital responsibility.
Wow. So fine just means I didn't get fired and my kids are alive.
Exactly. Your nervous system literally forgets what actual peace feels like, so it just accepts chronic tension as the new baseline. You say, I'm fine, and you genuinely mean it because your definition of fine has been completely warped.
So running on fumes just becomes the air you breathe. You don't even smell the smoke anymore.
That's a great way to put it.
That shift in the baseline is terrifying because it means you can't even trust your own internal gauges. And I think that moves us directly into the consequences of this adaptation. Because if the outside looks like a fortress of productivity, we have to turn inward to see what the actual cost of maintaining that fortress is.
And the cost is high.
It really is. Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly pretty haunting. The text drops this absolute gut punch of a line. After listing all the things that are getting perfectly executed, the work, the kids, the emails, it says, what's missing is you.
Oh, yeah.
The person is just quietly hollowing out.
Quietly hollowing out. It is a chilling phrase, but it captures the psychological reality so beautifully. The source breaks down this hollow core by listing very specific lived experiences, completely bypassing all the clinical jargon.
Yeah, which makes it so relatable.
Exactly. It describes the loss of the part of you that used to spontaneously laugh at things. It points to the part of you that genuinely liked your hobbies, not the part that, does hobbies to check a box or take a nice Instagram photo.
Right, like forced fun.
Yeah, not forced fun.
What?
The part that actually derived internal joy from them. The psychological term for this is anhedonia, the flattening of your emotional landscape where things that used to bring you pleasure just feel like more work.
I want to pause on that for a second because I think a lot of people might hear this and think, well, isn't everyone tired? Like, isn't being exhausted just the price of being an adult in the modern world?
It's a common defense mechanism.
Right. So where is the line between normal, expected adult exhaustion and this complete hollowing out that the text is talking about?
That is the crucial distinction right there. Normal adult exhaustion is physical or mental fatigue that is actually cured by rest.
Cured by rest. Okay.
Right. If you have a long week, you sleep in on Saturday, maybe watch a movie, and by Sunday, you feel a restoration of your energy and your personality. You bounce back.
You feel like yourself again.
Exactly. But the high-functioning burnout the text describes is not cured by a nap.
Wow.
The hollowing out is an emotional and identity-based depletion. You could sleep for 14 hours, but when you wake up, that spark, the desire to engage with the world beyond mere obligation, is still gone.
That is so heavy.
It is. And the text gets very specific about how this manifests behaviorally, too. It talks about being bone tired by 3 p.m. It mentions snapping at your partner over absolutely nothing.
Snapping at your partner. That one jumped out at me so much. Why is the partner always the collateral damage in this scenario?
Because of displacement. I mean, when you are overfunctioning, you are spending all your emotional regulation energy keeping the mask on for your boss, your colleagues, your friends.
Holding it all together for the public.
Right. By the time you get home, the reserve tank is completely empty.
Yeah.
And your partner is usually the safest person in your life. You subconsciously know they aren't going to fire you or abandon you if you lose your temper over a misplaced coffee mug.
Ah, so they get the worst of you because they're safe.
Exactly. So the exhaustion externalizes itself as irritation directed at the safest target. And perhaps the most defining symptom, the source list, is waking up and feeling nothing other than the instinct to just get through today.
Just get through today. That is literally the anthem of survival mode. You aren't living, you are just a checklist in motion.
Just a checklist.
Yeah. If you are listening to this right now and recognizing your own reflection in these words, I want to highlight something the source says directly to you. It offers this incredibly targeted validation. It explicitly states, if this is hitting close to home, you are not lazy, you are not making it up, and you are definitely not weak.
We really need to examine why the author chose to explicitly state those three specific things.
Yeah.
High-functioning people are notoriously driven by intense internal pressure.
Oh, absolutely.
They do not rely on external motivation. They use guilt as the primary fuel to keep their engine running. If they start to feel the effects of burnout, their immediate internal narrative is punitive.
They beat themselves up.
They do. They accuse themselves of being lazy. They tell themselves to toughen up. So by addressing this head-on, the text is offering structural permission to stop.
Wow, permission to stop.
Yeah, it is actively dismantling the guilt that keeps the overfunctioning cycle spinning in the first place. It validates that the internal exhaustion is a physiological reality, regardless of how successful the external output appears.
It's like an intervention for your inner critic. It is saying, I see the empty battery, even if your screen is still incredibly bright.
Exactly.
So, what does this all mean for the listener? Recognizing this hollow core is step one, but the piece explicitly states that this realization is an honest invitation to anyone running on fumes.
An invitation to actually do something about it.
Right. But here's the massive roadblock. What does practical help actually look like for someone who is already bone tired by 3 p.m.? I mean, if you tell an over-functioning, burnt-out person to go find a therapist, figure out your insurance, drive across town, you are just adding another daunting, energy-draining task to their impossible checklist.
You're just giving them more work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is where the source material pivots from the theoretical to the intensely practical. It introduces a specific model of care. Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC.
And this is a really vital pivot. Recognizing the problem without a frictionless escape route just leads to more anxiety.
Definitely.
When we analyze the logistical details of coping and healing counseling provided in the text, we see a structural design intended specifically to remove barriers for the exact exhausted demographic we are talking about. First of all, CHE operates entirely as a telehealth therapy practice.
Okay, telehealth.
Yes, it is 100% virtual, ITIPA compliant, and it serves all 159 counties in the state of Georgia.
Wait, I need to challenge this a bit.
Go for it.
If a person's burnout is driven by answering emails at all hours, staring at spreadsheets, and being hyper-connected to their digital devices, isn't a telehealth Zoom therapy session the absolute last thing they need? Will that actually help, or will it just feel like attending one more mandatory work meeting?
It is a very fair concern, I get that, but it really comes down to comparing the cognitive load of the alternatives.
Okay, unpack that.
Yes, it is another screen, but we have to look at the friction principle. For a person whose only daily goal is to just get through today, the logistical friction of traditional therapy is basically insurmountable.
Oh, because of the commute and everything?
Right. Traditional therapy requires blocking out 2 hours of your day. It requires navigating traffic, finding parking, sitting in some fluorescent waiting room, having the heavy emotional session, and then transitioning right back into traffic.
Ugh, yeah, I'm exhausted just thinking about that.
Exactly. Telehealth completely eliminates that logistical tax. The help comes directly to where you are. You can have a session in your living room in your sweatpants or, sitting in your parked car during a lunch break.
Right.
It lowers the barrier of entry to the absolute floor.
Okay, that actually makes a ton of sense. You are trading screen fatigue for zero friction, which is a trade the exhausted person desperately needs to make.
Exactly.
And the source highlights that this isn't just a small one-person operation either. CHC has a robust team of over 15 licensed therapists. They list out credentials like LCSWs, LPCs, and LMFTS, licensed clinical social workers, professional counselors, marriage and family therapists.
That breadth of expertise really matters.
Yeah, because burnout isn't a one-size-fits-all problem. But a specific detail that really caught my eye is that the source notes they are a diverse and culturally competent team. Let's unpack the mechanics of that. Because when your battery is at 1%, having a therapist with cultural competence is huge.
It is massive.
Right. If you have to spend the first 4 sessions of therapy just explaining your cultural background, your family dynamics, or like the nuances of your identity to someone who just doesn't get it, that is a massive energy expenditure.
Exactly. Cultural competence in a therapeutic setting is ultimately about energy conservation for the client.
Energy conservation. I like that.
Yeah. When the therapist already understands the cultural framework you are operating within, you bypass the exhausting education phase of therapy.
You don't have to translate your existence.
Precisely. You can immediately get to work on the actual healing. And when we look at CHC's specific clinical specialties, we see how precisely they map onto the pathology of high-functioning burnout we just analyzed. The source lists their focus areas as burnout, stress, anxiety, depression, trauma, PTSD, grief, and relationships.
It reads like a direct answer key to the symptoms from the first half of the article.
It really does. Let's trace the causality here. When the article talks about the hollowing out of your identity and the loss of joy, well, CHC's expertise in depression and grief becomes highly relevant.
Because losing a part of yourself is basically a grieving process.
Yes. And when the article mentions snapping at your partner, their focus on relationship therapy is the direct tool to address that displacement we talked about earlier.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
And they even list trauma and PTSD, which might sound extreme for workplace burnout. But a nervous system stuck in chronic survival mode for years actually begins to mimic the physiological responses of trauma. They have the specific therapeutic tools required for this exact cluster of symptoms.
Which explains why they offer such a wide range of services. The source outlines that they provide individual therapy, but also couples and family therapy. Because as we just established, high-functioning burnout doesn't just stay contained to the individual.
No, it bleeds into everything.
It bleeds into your marriage, it affects your parenting, it alters the whole family dynamic. And they also offer teen therapy for ages 13 and up, plus life coaching. So whether the burnout is blowing up your career trajectory or causing friction at the dinner table, there is a dedicated avenue for it. But we have to talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to getting mental health support: the cost. Because let's be real, financial anxiety is often the core driver of the overfunctioning Luke to begin with.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Financial pressure is frequently the foundational reason people refuse to slow down.
Yeah.
The thought process is usually, if I stop overworking, I won't be able to afford my life.
Right.
And the terrible irony of therapy is that if it costs $200 an hour, the high-functioning person will literally just take on more work and generate more burnout, just to pay for the therapy to treat the burnout.
That is a vicious, vicious cycle.
It is. This is why the accessibility details the source provides for CHC are not just, administrative bullet points. They are the mechanism that breaks the cycle.
Right. It stops the paradox of working to afford to stop working. The source outlines their insurance acceptance, and it is genuinely accessible. For people in Georgia on Medicaid, the copay is $0. Let me just repeat that. $0 out of pocket.
Removing the financial barrier entirely from Medicaid patients is profound. It really democratizes access to mental health care for a population that is often dealing with compounded systemic stressors.
It's a game changer.
Truly. And for individuals with commercial insurance, the source specifically lists that CHC accepts Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, and Humana. For those patients, the out-of-pocket cost for a session ranges from $30 to $40.
$30 to $40 for an hour with a licensed clinical professional. That transforms therapy from an impossible luxury for the wealthy into a realistic, sustainable utility for the average exhausted person.
Exactly.
It makes that honest invitation we talked about an actual door you can walk through rather than just a nice idea on paper. If you're listening to this deep dive and realizing that your fine is entirely fabricated and you need to walk through that door, the source material lays out exactly how to do it. You don't have to go searching.
All the info's right there.
Right. You can reach their team by calling 404-832-0102. You can go to their website at cheechtherapy.com to look at the team and the services. Or if picking up a phone feels like too much friction right now, you can literally just send an email to support@cheechtherapy.com. The point isn't to necessarily memorize the contact info right this second. The point is that the safety net is fully constructed and hanging right there. All you have to do is fall into it.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of this material. The overarching lesson here is a dual truth that high achievers find incredibly difficult to internalize.
What's that?
You can be exceptionally productive, widely respected, entirely capable, and simultaneously deeply dangerously burnt out.
Wow. Yeah.
The fact that the work is getting done, that the external responsibilities are perfectly managed, does not invalidate the reality of your internal depletion.
The perfectly formatted spreadsheet does not mean that you are okay. The honest invitation of this entire deep dive is to recognize the quiet hollowing out before the structural collapse happens. To realize that affordable, zero-friction help like coping and healing counseling exists so that you don't have to wait until you are completely broken to finally deserve support.
And this raises an important question, and is the thought I want to leave directly with you, the listener, to process today.
Okay, let's hear it.
If your particular brand of burnout is perfectly disguised as extreme competence, if your entire nervous system is built on the belief that you can never let anything drop, what would happen if you intentionally dropped just one completely unimportant ball tomorrow?
Oh, wow.
Would the world actually end?
Yeah.
Or would you finally have a hand free to catch your breath?
That is the real question. Because right now, your screen is at maximum brightness, the interface looks perfect, and society thinks you are operating flawlessly. But only you know what the battery indicator really says. Don't wait until the screen goes completely black to realize you needed to plug it in. Take care of yourselves out there.